Hey everyone, it's Jake at Jake's Metal Chat. Hope you're all well and welcome to episode 90 of my Metal Vault, where I will be exploring and showing you my favorite albums within the world of metal. As well as talking about the albums, I will also be talking about the band, so a brief history and any releases leading up to the album that I have picked. And this one here is an absolute beast of an album. A lot of us in the VC will know this album very well. We will know the band very well. But for anyone who is a fan of death metal, you death metal maniacs out there, and you're looking for a new band and a new album to listen to, then this right here is just, again, an absolute beast. I finally got to see them in 2022 at UK Death Fest, and I've had their vocalist here on the channel for my podcast, and hearing some of these songs live on this album was just so good to just see that live. It was absolutely brilliant stuff, and this whole album from start to finish is just incredible. So for you death metal maniacs out there, you're looking for a new album and a new band, well, look no further. This is Massacre, and I'm going to be showing you their debut from 1991. So once again, this is Massacre with that debut from Beyond. And what an album this is! Just absolutely killer old school death metal. And it's just one hell of a brilliant album right here. Of course, on the back, you got the band themselves. So Terry Butler, Bill Andrews, Rick Ross, and Cam Lee. This is a re-release because it has Inhuman Condition on it. One hell of a great EP. Just Massacre doing what Massacre does and bringing out some just brilliant death metal. And this album is a testament to that. And you can get this with so the swirling vortex is blue and these demon guys are red. But this is the cover that I saw first, which was the pink swirling vortex with the demons in yellow. And yeah, both colors worked very well. Of course, we've got the CD with the artwork on it. Of course, released by Eric Records, as they've released a lot of great stuff over the years. Of course, we got the artwork on the EP. No, artwork on the booklet as well. So I was going back to the EP then. And of course, we have here, as it is a re-release, a nice little poster of the artwork. Look at that. Really cool stuff. Was tempted to frame this and put it on my wall for my music room once I got all that sorted out in there. But I might keep it in the booklet just to keep it in the CD. But keep it in the case, that's what I'm trying to say. Keep it in there just so it's all together. That might change over time, but for now I'll just keep it in there. And of course we do have another picture of the band themselves. Yeah, just one hell of a great band here. Excellent stuff. As you know, I love my death metal. Tend to talk about that a lot more than thrash metal, black metal, doom metal, sludge metal. But I do have a good range of those bands coming up in this series. But yeah, this album right here, not heard it, go and check it out. Everything will be in the description below, so you can have a listen to this for yourself. But before I go on to the album itself and talk about the songs, let's talk about the band, Massacre. So these guys formed in 1984 in Tampa, Florida. They split up in 1987 because around that time, Bill and Terry and Rick joined Death. What Bill and Rick were on the Leprosy album, and then Terry joined a little after that. So Terry Butler was in Death from where is it? 1987 to 1990. He was not on the Leprosy album, but he was in the band at that time. But he did appear on the Spiritual Healing album. So pretty much from 88 to 80, 87 to 89, they weren't active because Bill, Rick, and Terry were in death at the time. And then Rick left, and then they had Paul from Cynic play for a while, and then James Murphy joined, and then he was on Spiritual Healing. So, and then in 1989, they reformed, and of course, around that time, the debut was released, and then they split up in 1992 after their EP in the Human Condition, and then reformed in 1993 to 1996, and then 2006 to 2008, 2011 to 2014, and then 2017 they were called Massacre X, and then 2017 to 2019 they were called Gods of Death, and then 2019 they reformed for the final time and have been active ever since. So around the first time they were active, they released three demos. The first one being Aggressive Tyrant on the 6th of April 1986, which had on bass at this point and guitar as well. So on bass was Mike Borders, who is still active in another band today and was, of course, in Massacre from 85 to 86 and then 2019 to 2024. And hasn't done a lot. Of course, he's still in a band today called Pain Ward, which I'm not sure what sort of stuff that is. I might have to find them and check them out. And on guitar at that time was Alan West. Now, everyone will know him for being in Obituary, of course, being on Slowly Rot, The Incomplete, Will Demise, Back from the Dead, Frozen in Time. Of course, was in 6 Feet Under from 93 to 98. Of course, 6 Feet Under being Chris Bonds' band after leaving Cannibal Corpse. And of course, was in Executioner before changing their name to Obituary. So yeah, that was the lineup at that time. Of course, Bill was the founding member of the band. And of course, I think when did Cam Lee came in on vocals in 1985. And I don't think at the time they had a vocalist before Cam Lee in 85 by the name of Mark. But in terms of that, they didn't have a vocalist before that. So yeah, that was the lineup at that time. And in the official live tape, this is when they had Rick on guitar. This was on the 20th of April 1986, so the same month of that year. And all the demos I'm going to be talking about all independent releases. So then yeah, Rick came in at this point in where was it? 1985 to 87. Of course, was in Death when they were called Mantis in 83 to 84. Then left Death in 85, and then rejoined in 87, left in 89. Of course, like I said, he was on the Leprosy album. And on this release of this demo, they did a cover of Black Magic by Slayer. And one of the tracks, track number one, is of course on the debut album. And then the last demo they released in 86 before they split up a year later was Chamber of Ages on the 10th of June 1986. And of course, two of the tracks on there appear on the debut, one of them being which is the title track of the debut. And then when they reformed in 89, so a year after they reformed for the first time, they released their last demo on the 9th of November 1990, the second coming, and it is a great demo. This had Butch Gonzalez on bass, who has not been active since then, was in a band called Temper, but is no longer in that band now. Is no longer active in music. And of course, this was also independent release. And then in 1991, and just to also add, Bill was not playing drums at this point. He was still in Death at the time. Then came back into the fold and then released this from Beyond on Earache Records. So they were signed to Earache and then released this monster of a debut on the 1st of July 1991. And it is 9 tracks overall. Like I said, I will be talking just mainly about this album. Of course, just to quickly talk about Inhuman Condition, which was a year later. That was 4 tracks overall and a great EP to then continue on from what they started with this. So, lineup, like I just showed with the picture, is Cam Lee on vocals, Rick Ross on guitar, Terry Butler on bass, and Bill Andrews on drums. They had Walter on rhythm guitars for this release, and then 4 who did layouts, producing, engineering, artwork, logo, photography. So Jay Barry was the one who did the layout of the album. Also for Forest of Equilibrium, which is an album that I have covered on here on this series. For Cathedral, of course, Cathedral's album. And then Fudge Tunnel, Hate Songs in E minor. Godflesh, and of course Morbid Angel, Napalm Death, and Nocturnus, which Camley did guest vocals for on that album. Not just for the key, that is. And of course, Jay Berry also did the layout for Thresholds. Then we have Chris Helton, who did the photography, so for the picture I showed you earlier, and also for another band as well. Then we have Colin Richardson, who has done producing mixing for a plethora of bands. Of course, 3 Inches of Blood, Anathema, Carcass being one of the many big bands to come out of the UK within the extreme metal genre. And Boltfer, of course. And then there's Brutal Truth, Cannibal Corpse, Cradle of Filth, Chimera. Go down the list a bit. Trivium. He also did Solve a New Machine by Fear Factory, as well as Demanufacture, both brilliant albums. Extreme Noise Terror, Damage 381, Fudge Tunnel, Hate Songs in E minor, as well as Godflesh, Gore Fest, Gore Guts, and the list goes on. Creator, Loud Blast, Machine Head, Massacre from France, Overkill. Again, I can go on forever listing all the bands here. And of course, for engineering was Scott Burns, who has engineered for, again, a plethora of bands. Mentioned Cannibal Corpse earlier, Acheron, or Acheron, however you choose to pronounce the band, Annihilator, Atheist, Atrocity for their album Hallucinations, brilliant album, Cancer, To the Gory End, and Death Shall Rise, and Cynic, Death, Deicide, Demented Ted, Demolition Hammer. Of course, I got the poster from when they went on tour of them back in 1992, I believe that was. Got that from David from Black City Records when he saw him in London on that tour back in the day. Disincarnate, of course, going back to Scott Burns and what bands he's worked with. Gorguts, Loud Blast, Method Creation, Master, Morgoth, Obituary, and again, the list goes on. Suffocation, and name one more here, Vital Remains and Whiplash. And then to end with that is Ed Reepka. I hope I said his name right. Of course, has done artwork for, again, plethora of bands. 3 Inches of Blood is a band I've mentioned pretty much earlier. And of course, Atheist. And who else do we have here? Of course, Massacre, Death, Elm Street, Evil Dead, Gruesome, and Hyrax, Again, I can go on forever here. Megadeth, Nuclear Assault, Municipal Waste, and let's name one more. Solstice, which is Rob Barrett's band before he joined Maverick Creation, and then Cannibal Corpse, and then going back to Maverick Creation, and then Cannibal Corpse. And yeah, again, I can go on forever with the amount of bands these guys have worked with. And from start to finish, this album is just an absolute belter of an album, an absolute beast of an album. Cam, Rick, Terry, and Bill all did their parts so damn well on this album. And again, it's 9 tracks overall. And the first track, which of course is the first track I ever heard by these guys, which is Dawn of Eternity, which starts off very just a dark, atmospheric vibe. And then you get the guitars coming in, got the and then the drums come in, and then it just kicks right in with just some absolute aggression with the guitars, bass, drums, Cam coming in with his growls, his screams, and it's you can definitely hear that throughout this entire album. So every song has that just equal amount of aggression in there. And then you got Cryptic Realms, which you got Bill coming in with that nice little drum fill, and then it just kicks in with the guitars. It's like it's fast, mid-tempo, and everything's just stupidly heavy here. And then Biohazard is still continuing on from where Cryptic Realms and Dawn of Eternity left off, which is just again, it's just Cam's vocals on this are insane. And he was doing this before there was even bands doing growls. I mean, you got bands doing like really sh like raspy, shouty style vocals, and then you hear something like this, and it's like, okay, that's something new. Someone might have thought it wasn't going to catch on. Well, it definitely did catch on, and various different vocalists within death metal have done different variations, and his growls and screams are, yeah, they're just they're insane. But then in some cases, if you heard it for the first time, it would be quite terrifying. And then you get Chamber of Ages, which has that, yeah, like the wind blowing, and it's like you got that with Dawn of Eternity with wind blowing, and you get more of it here, and then it's like that orchestration bit, and then it just kicks right into the song. And then of course you got the title track, which this one just kicks off with all the guitars, the bass, and the drums, and it's just, of course, this is From Beyond, and yeah, I mean, what a track this is! It's just an absolute stellar track. They are all absolutely brilliant. Of course, I got my favorites on this album. Of course, the title track, Cryptic Realms, Biohazard, Chamber of Ages, and of course the title track itself, and also love the very last track as well. And of course, last year I did listen to this album while I was in the gym doing my workout, and it's a great album to have on. And then we carry on with the album with Defeat Remains. And again, this whole album from start to finish is just, I mean, it's got different variations of like atmosphere. So, like Dawn of Eternity and Chamber of Ages definitely have those atmospheric parts of like the wind blowing in Dawn of Eternity. And then those orchestrational bits in Chamber of Ages. But throughout, it's mainly just the drums, the nasty guitar, the bass, Cam's almost demonic style vocals. They are quite demonic sounding. And then you got Succubus. Again, carrying on that aggression. Guitars right there in the forefront, the bass as well, especially in From Beyond, like near the end. You got Terry doing a nice little bass line in there. And then you get Symbolic Immortality, which is just getting closer and closer to the end of the album here, and it's a good little song to get to that last bit of the album to finish it all off. And then of course you get Corpse Grinder, and you get those whammy bar parts. A lot of it you get with Rick. He does a lot of his solo work with that, and he makes it sound just, I don't know, he just seems to put a lot more aggression into it. And he did that, of course, with Leprosy when he was in Death. Of course, he was in Death way before that when they were called Mantis. But yeah, Corpse Grinder, just that, and then it's just like you're getting that whammy bar dive bombs, and then all of a sudden it's just like woof. And then, of course, the last beat when you hear Camley go grind, and it just that echo afterwards where it's just grind, grind like that, and it's just perfectly, perfectly ends this album off. But this album from start to finish, I know I had different things to say by each song. I know a lot of it was the same sort of thing, but it's carrying on that aggression. It's carrying on that flow. And this definitely has flow to it. Of course, like I said, Dawn of Eternity has that atmospheric part, and it has that bit of orchestration in there as well as Chamber of Ages has that orchestrational bit. And I like when bands do add elements of that into it because it gives it that little bit of more of a touch of atmosphere in there. And of course, in conclusion, of course, it is a heavy record. It's a beast of an album. Cam's vocals are just evil, demonic sounding. Rick's guitar work, his whammy dive bombs are intense. It's like he's about to break his guitar. Terry's bass is just absolutely on point, and that bass part near the end of just as the title track is ending is just superb. Bill's drumming on point as always. Put that all together, you got a timeless classic on your hands here. And it is a timeless classic. It will be. Every album I have talked about on here so far is a timeless classic, for their own reasons. And this definitely is one for just, you know, stepping up a level, because a lot of bands, they do step up a level with various different things. And it definitely, definitely is a death metal album for all you death metal maniacs out there that has not checked this out. You're not familiar with Massacre, because I didn't know who these guys were for a long time. Because when I got into death metal, I only just got into like Cannibal Corpse and Obituary and Suffocation, Morbid Angel. I found these guys around 2008, and then found many more death metal bands after that. And yeah, these guys are in that list of my favorite death metal bands. So definitely do check this out if you have not heard it, and if you're a sucker for like whammy dive bomb solos, this is chocked full of it. And I do love hearing that whammy bar sound. There's bits in it where he just holds it for such a long, long while, not like for like eternity, but for like 5 to 10 seconds. And I just like it, especially when you hear it in like Death when he's playing in Leprosy. So you get him doing that, and then you get Chuck doing the solos after that. I mean, for the Dawn of Eternity, you get a solo in there afterwards. Not the whammy bar dive bomb type ones, but the like more traditional solos, and that blends very well into that as well. But yeah, an album that I will continue to love for, well, basically ever. And if you haven't heard it in a while, give it another spin. If you're on CD, put in your CD player. You got on cassette, pop it into your cassette player or in your Walkman if you still use a Walkman. Or if you got on vinyl, give it another spin. And of course, this will be in the description below for those to listen to. And yeah, one of my favorite death metal albums to come out of the early 90s, and just one of my favorite death metal albums overall. Massacre and From Beyond. And that is it for this episode of my Metal Vault. And Happy New Year to you all. I hope everyone has had a good start to the year so far. Of course, it's only the 6th of January so far, but I hope everyone is having a good year so far. And I will be back with another episode of this series, and I will be back with my collection updates, and of course, a part two to my top favorite metal releases of 2025. Because there was a couple I forgot to put in my first one, so they'll be in my second one with along with the albums I will be buying at some point this year from last year. So thank you very much for tuning in. Hear me prattle on as normal, and been meaning to cover this album for a while, and it's still very more like this. I still need the cover, be it death metal, thrash metal, black metal, doom metal, sludge metal, folk metal, whichever genre it is that of an album that I haven't covered yet. It will be in this series. It'll probably be another album from a band I've already spoken about, but yeah, I will be covering more albums from bands that I've already shown here already, and of course bands I haven't shown yet. So thank you very much for tuning in. Do all the usual, like, share, comment, subscribe to keep up to date with everything that I got coming up. I've been Jacob, Jake's Metal Chat. Keep the banner of metal well and truly high. Happy New Year to you all, and I'll see you in another episode of my Metal Vault.